Welcome to the Pedalshift Project. This is episode 100.
Greetings and welcome to the 100th edition of the Pedalshift Project. The Pedalshift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride, let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/100. Email the show, pedalshift@pedalshift.net, or call the voicemail hotline at 202-930-1109, and you can check Pedalshift out on all the socials as well. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to, as I said, the 100th edition of the Pedalshift Project. Can you believe it? We finally got here. No more leading zeros. I'm really excited to be hosting this show. I'm Tim Mooney, by the way, if you didn't know that already. And I'm excited to bring you the big interview, the big roundtable from this past weekend in the land of sunshine and bunnies, Portland, Oregon. It was a really great trip. I do this trip every year. It's separate and apart from the podcast. I go hang out with my nephew kind of before the holidays really kick into gear. And this year was really special for me because I was giving him his first bike. I got him a little balance bike, and it was just super exciting. And that was a real highlight of my weekend, in a weekend full of freaking highlights. I can't even get over it. The weekend really kicked off for me on Friday evening at the Pedalshift 100 Meetup over at the Beer Mongers, you know, at the corner of Southeast Division and 12th. We talk about that a lot. Anyways, that was a lot of fun. It was really cool to meet people that I knew of, but never actually had the pleasure to physically meet in person. Aqua and Cameron are two names that come to mind. And, you know, to meet up with Brock and Aaron and Kat and all the other types of folks that you've heard on the show before as well. It was a really fun night. If you were able to check it out on the live stream, I think there were only a couple of people that were, but it was awesome to do because I knew that I would have the video for later as well. That's all going to be embedded over at pedalshift.net/100, the show notes for this episode. So you can go check that out. It was fun. I just sort of walked around the bar and said hi to people, and they said hi back and all that other good stuff. It was kind of a fun, I think it's maybe 15 minutes or so that we spent doing that. So it's worth checking out. Just put some names to faces at the very least. We also learned the origin of the big stick on the ceiling at the Beer Mongers. If this means nothing to you, it's cool, but it's a thing. They have a big stick on the ceiling. But so I'm not going to include that in this particular program, but you can go to pedalshift.net/100 for a rather illuminating interview with the gentleman who had a couple of fine beverages there, the purveyors of fine beverages, the Beer Mongers. So yeah, anyways, interviewed him, and now we know a little bit more about the big stick suspended from the ceiling at the place where I had my meetup for Pedalshift 100. So that was a lot of fun. Saturday, we did the recording that you'll be hearing in a few minutes here, and also was able to go to the Portland Podfest, and I'll talk a little bit about that after the interview. But I thought just as a preliminary thing, it was kind of cool to see the state of podcasting in a community like Portland. I mean, the fact that there were, I think a dozen or more podcasts that were getting time on a main stage and a secondary stage to just show off what they do in front of a live studio audience. I thought it was really cool. And I was really impressed, quite frankly, with it's a heavy lift. I mean, as somebody who's done podcasting for a minute or two or 10 years or whatever, there's a big difference between me sitting here at a table with nobody around and talking at a single microphone, and the contrast to an entire audience full of people in a live setup. It is a totally different type of communications type of thing. Who are you playing to? The home audience, the audience in front of you. You can't really do both very well at the same time. Trust me, I was really impressed with the talent and the ability of the folks out there. So big ups on the Portland podcasting community. That's all I have to say about that. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the other podcasts that I did. I felt like I was recording the entire weekend because I kind of was. So we'll talk a little bit more about what you can check out in your ear holes with me involved in separate and apart from this show. Without further ado, I want to introduce the roundtable here. This was, I think, close to 6 months in the making to be able to kind of gather all these folks together in one spot. I'll do the intros as part of the roundtable that's going ahead here, but we've got folks from the Sprocket podcast. We got Kat Caparello as well from the Joyride. We'll talk a little bit more about her show in the midst of the interview as well. We talked about a whole bunch of stuff. Everything is sort of at least somewhat related to bicycle touring. Some things a little bit more tangentially than others, but I think that it was really great to get that kind of wisdom of the crowd together, and I think that you all really will enjoy what everyone has to say. It's a diverse group. It's an interesting group. You've heard them all individually. You just haven't heard them all at the same time on the show. And that's, I think, what made this so special for me. So without further ado, here is the Pedalshift 100 Roundtable. Welcome, everybody, to the Centennial Edition, the 100th episode of the Pedalshift Project. My name is Tim Mooney. I am joined by, I think, a ragtag gang of people that you've heard on the show before. You've heard on their podcasts as well. I've got 3 of the 4 historical members of the Sprocket podcast. I've got Mr. Aaron Flores, who's closest to the microphone.
Hey-o, how's it going?
Also, Brock Dittus, who's going to have to reach over.
Hello.
That was close enough. We got Guthrie Straw. Hello.
Greetings.
And Kat Caparello from the Joyride, Season 2 coming in 2018, correct?
Season 3.
Season 3.
Coming soon. I know.
Excuse me for not having the right seasonality to that.
I know. You should know, Tim.
I love your show. I cannot wait for Season 3.
Thank you.
Do you have any preview of anybody who's coming on? Any in the can?
Not that I'm willing to share at this point.
Oh, we got mystery.
Yeah, not that I'm willing to share.
It's the mystery edition, the Season 3.
I think it's interesting that you're going by seasons.
I love that.
Not necessarily episode number.
Yeah, I discovered that the show has a season to it. It's got a cycle to it. Because I am just kind of, with doing it myself, I don't have one other person that I'm like, we're going to meet every week. And I don't want to be hanging out, editing podcasts in the summer when it's gorgeous out. I want to be out riding my bike and instead of indoors talking to people about how cool it is to ride bikes.
That sounds like such a great idea.
Yeah, I've just noticed that over, I've been doing it for 2 years. This is going into year 3, and it just sort of has had this natural cycle to it. So yeah, I'm going to seasons, claiming it. It's my podcast. I can do what I want to, and go 10 episodes at a time, and then see what's next.
Kat was the person who introduced me to Jasmine Reese, who I've had on the show twice, and who is just a light, sunshine, etc. about bicycle touring. So I always have to thank you for introducing me and to the world. Well, I don't know the rest of the world, but you certainly had her on a podcast, and that's how I learned about her. So
yeah, thanks. I think Jasmine's doing some really cool stuff.
She really is. So hey, we're just chatting here. This is we're going to talk a little bit about bike touring and sort of. I think all of you have unique contributions to sort of what bike touring means to you, and I thought we'd talk a little bit about where bike touring is right now, because I feel like that this is like a meet the press kind of thing. I got a table full of people who can talk about cool things about bike touring, so I thought we'd talk about that as part of the 100th edition here. So, but I do want to, just in case this is someone's first exposure to any of you haven't listened to this show, you haven't listened to their shows, I thought I would go around the table and sort of get a quick little snippet, what's your connection to bicycle touring? Take it where you will. Kat, I'm going to start with you over here to my right.
Oh, goodness. So my connection to bicycle touring, I think when I was thinking about this, I'm like, is it a person? Is it a person that connected me to bicycle touring? I think it's just sort of a circumstance of being a total map nerd and also a camping nerd, and then discovering that I'm actually also a bike nerd. And then when you can put those 3 things together and get yourself from point A to point B and set up camp and feed yourself and, go home the next day, there's something to that autonomy that I really love. And that was just it. I was like, this is something when I learned that people could do it, that it was something people actually did, I was like, I need to figure that out. I need to do that for myself. So yeah, it was just sort of the confluence of bike nerd, map nerd, and camping gear nerd. And I'm like, I just love seeing all the different setups and where people go. So.
I have met so many people that have the map nerd gene, and that's also how they got into it, which I think is so fascinating.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, I love that. Guthrie, what about you?
Wow, that's a good one to follow. I got my connection into bike touring through somewhat similar means, just the enjoyment of the outdoors, as well as being into seeing a lot, but not having to work very hard for it, which I think is great for bike touring. And just had a really great time on a short tour back in 2011 or so, and just kind of fell head over heels into the bike world.
What when you're talking about like not having to work terribly hard for it, what does that mean to you?
Bikes are a wonderfully efficient machine.
They are,
and they allow you to see so much for so little effort. That I think that's just like, it is my speed for experiencing the world.
Yeah. Traveling, seeing things at 10 to 15 miles per hour is super dope.
Life is better from the pedals.
I like that. That should be your catchphrase.
It should be.
Or someone's going to steal it, so you should,
If you'd like to steal that, you are welcome to it.
Look at that. Open source.
Wow.
Creative Commons by Guthrie.
You can CC 4.0. Are we at 4.0 for Creative Commons? You can CC 3.0. No attribution needed.
All right. So, an intellectual property nerd here. That's good.
Oh, I got into bike touring through being an intellectual property nerd.
Done and done. Aaron, you, talk about your sort of like background with bicycle touring.
I can't really say I'm a map nerd or a bike nerd. I do geek out on bikes and gear a lot. I'm certainly not a intellectual property nerd. Maybe more of an intellectual property violator. Which
I think of all the people at this table, I don't know. Are you the biggest wrench at this table? I mean, are you the one that's the most?
I mean, Guthrie actually works in a bike shop.
I think it's between the two of you.
He wins.
Yeah. You're the
tinkerer there. You do
that's what I was thinking.
That I do. But as like a passion,
for free.
Yeah, no. Like
free.
it's not even that. It's out of this deep seated passion I feel.
Yeah, and just wanting to see how things work.
Yeah,
and honestly, I think that's a kind of a segue into how I got into bike touring. Is I've always had this DIY bend to my life. It's the whole punk rock kid in me still, and watching others do bike touring and seeing how far they go and what they've seen under their own power was, I think, the thing that drew me the most. And how little consequence you're having on the things around you. Yeah, I can get from here to Detroit by plane in like 5 hours maybe. And that's great. I can see family real quick and then I can go home. But, I mean, the infrastructure that it takes for that plane to be built, for that plane to be fueled, for me to sit in this nice comfy couch in the sky.
You are flying a different airline than I am.
With crying children. No. But anyways, I mean, under relative comfort, like there's a lot of consequence to that. And the bicycle, I mean, building the bicycle, it's an industry, sure, but the industry to build a bike versus the industry to build a plane and to travel on that bike versus traveling on a plane, the sort of environmental impacts and even just the social impacts on that. I'm lucky enough to live here in Portland where, just last night I'm biking from point A to point B and I found like point A, point 5 and ran into, I know those are two different systems. That doesn't matter. But I ran into a coworker of Anna's and then we like got to chatting up for a while.
Yeah, the fun little opportunities that you run into.
Yeah. And I obviously wouldn't be able to do that in many other modes of transportation.
I think it also connects back to what Kat was saying about self-reliance and stuff like that, too. I think that's a common thread between what everybody's been saying. Hey, Brock, what about you, bike touring? I know you've done some Bataan death marches and whatnot. And I've read your blog about those. So
it's my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, what's your story?
I think Kat said it well. Just the idea that you can be interested in one mode of going outdoors and then combine that with another one. Like I really enjoyed riding bikes, but I'd never thought about going out and riding bikes and then sleeping outside on the same day. And my wife, back when we first got together, was really interested in that idea. And she was the one that said, "Hey, let's try this." And so we did. And it was fun, and we did it again. But from the first night out and being like, "Can we actually do this? This is crazy." And then going to, I think the longest tour we took was 8 weeks in 2014, I think. That was great. And also the self-reliance, just being like, hey, how far off the grid can I get and still feel like a human being and still have fun?
Yeah, totally. And I love what you said there about how combining those things. I used to bike a lot, and then I like to camp because I was a camping nerd. I still am. But, then somehow my buddy Mysterious James is like, hey, did you know there's this thing called bike touring where you put the camping gear on the bike? And it was just sort of like, it's that GIF with the dude from The Daily Show in his mind, the mind blown.
Mind blown.
That was totally what happened to me. So it's the same. I have the same exact story. So I totally understand that. One of the things that I think is interesting about, interesting. I need to out myself.
Interesting.
Okay, yeah. So we all know if you listen to both of the shows that there's team 3 syllables and team 4 syllables, and we all know which one is correct. My problem that
3 syllables.
My problem is that my mom from southeastern Michigan is on team 4 syllables. I learned the other day.
There's an extra syllable?
Interesting. She says interesting.
Interesting.
I'm on team 4.
Wow.
I'm on team 3. Interesting, because that's how it's said. I'm like literally the only person.
I don't know. I think I might
Yeah.
jump onto team 4 now.
I think that in real life it probably has 4 syllables. I think that that's actually the way that it should be, but I will probably not ever say it like that unless I'm around Brock too long.
I remind everybody that this is a celebration of my podcast here today, and that
So we are all on team 3.
everybody
syllable
should say interesting for the rest of the podcast.
Interesting.
Anyways,
I will try my best.
And, yeah, good luck, everybody. Life's a rich tapestry, yada, yada, yada. The fun thing about bike touring that I find is that it's kind of a slog at times. And I think that one of the things that we all like is that type 2 fun that we've heard about so much. And I'm just curious, what was sort of your most favorite challenge that in the moment was just the worst, but you actually look back on it and go, oh, I did that, or oh, actually that was kind of fun. Does anybody have something that they know off the top of their head that they want to share?
I mean, I know I've talked about this a lot, so
Bring it on.
I'm sure people are probably tired of hearing about this, but that slog up Bohemia Saddle, which is, where's that near?
It's down just outside of Cottage Grove on their 116-mile bike path.
And for non-Oregon people, Cottage Grove is where?
It's actually only about 22 miles, but every time you talk to a local, it gets longer.
It just grows every year.
Cottage Grove is what, like? Yeah, okay, yeah, a couple miles south of you. Anyhow, going up this saddle or this spur over this mountain, we were sticking mostly to like fire roads and Forest Service roads, and I don't know if it was a wrong turn or if like the maps indicated that it was like hard packed dirt or road, but it was neither. It was just loose gravel, and it was like pretty steep. So our tires couldn't get any tread. We had 2 trailers and 2 small children and 5 adults, and we had to pretty much spend all 8 hours of the day, taking bikes up almost one at a time. Like you would, and it was like the middle of summer, so it was really hot out.
P.S.
Yeah, and so you would just do this thing where like someone would be in the shade for a while, or we'd all be huddled in the shade for a while, and someone would just kind of get up and like grab a bike and start walking up. And another person would like grab a bike and a trailer or whatever and start walking up. Another person would like, take their kids and walk up, and we'd just keep going until like the next shady spot. And then, whoever made the shade first would put the gear or the bike or whatever down and come back down the mountain and like help other people out, bring their stuff up. Every time I talk about this, like I get this look from people who don't do a lot of bike touring, like what the hell is your problem?
You took vacation days for that?
Right, exactly. Like these were non-paid vacation days too.
Exactly.
Yeah. But in all honesty, like the sort of bonding that we all had because of this experience, the shared trauma bonding that is pretty strong. I don't know if I would trade that experience for anything. That said, I don't know if I would do that again.
Right.
But
in the moment, were you just like, this sucks. This sucks.
For a little while, but I also
Brock was kind of laughing extra hard there. He's like, yes.
I have this kind of mentality where if I see other people suffering, I like feel like I have to like ratchet up the happiness, and I'll like start making dumbass jokes a lot and be like, come on, we can do this, guys. All right.
You're the dog in the burning bar going, everything is fine.
it's fine. It's fine.
If you knew, Aaron, that say that you knew there was a paved road roughly parallel to that route that we could have done far more easy, just in a hypothetical context. How would you feel?
I'll kill you! I'll kill you!
Good thing that's not the case.
Yeah.
I have so many people that listen
We could have been on paved road the whole time.
dude. I have so many people
We could have been.
that listen to this show who have never been on a bike tour, and they're just doing this because they're interested. It's an aspirational thing, and so I always love having these stories go through so that they know, look, it is not all sunshine and bunnies on bike tour, but it actually is part of the charm of the whole thing.
And slightly more recent, going through Big Sur, just outside of Monterey, California, we got hit. They were during a drought, by the way. Like, you couldn't even get water in restaurants. It was during a drought, but of course we hit Monterey and we go through it, and then just hit this downpour, and we're just soaked. And none of us really have our rain gear with us. But there's this point where I felt really good. I don't know, maybe it's adrenaline or whatever, but I said after a while, like, there's this point in your brain called ecstasy, and it's just beyond misery. But yeah, like it on top of like all the misery and being wet, like we still like huddled together in this little barn, and like that little experience also is sort of what brought us all together.
Yeah, there's a bonding thing. I think when you're solo, those moments are a little
so
different. Because I usually tend to ride alone.
Yeah.
So that moment to me, I'd be like, fuck this. Kat, do you have a? Oh, you're about to take a sip.
That's okay.
Sorry,
That's all right.
Kat. What about you? I know you have the frying pan that you lugged. Anything else that's sort of in that realm that?
Well, I don't know.
That was for the greater good, though.
Yeah, a short version of that was for the greater good. I hosted the bike camping, intro to bike camping with Women Bike here, part of the Street Trust, this past year here in Portland. And I wanted to make it really beginner friendly, so I didn't want anyone to have to worry about feeding themselves. So I fed everybody.
You still say that as if that was a terrible idea.
It was.
It was a great idea.
You know what? It was a great experience overall, but
And how many people was this?
thankfully only 9.
Okay.
Plus me.
Still,
That's a
That's a lot to
lot.
feed over
the
like a
week
fire.
before, I'm going to tell you something. The week before, we had 23 people signed up for that.
Oh, Lord.
and then the weather forecast came out, and it was going to be in the upper 90s, and people started dropping off of that like flies. And I really, I plan to do this again, and I want everyone to come and have this experience, but it will be planned differently so that I'm not maybe feeding 23 people with a frying pan. So I had a frying pan strapped to the back of my bike. That's like the shortest version of that.
That's just the signal of like badass bike touring right there.
It was really silly.
Yeah.
It was really silly.
Like we're not messing around here.
Are we talking
Yeah.
like steel bottom, cast iron?
No, my God. No. It was like one of these like folding.
Well, at
I
least it
spent
was light.
$800 on this titanium frying pan. No, that was just something different. I think for one of these, I think of it like the suffering the most sort of a moment. Summer before last, I rode solo to the coast from my front door, basically, and I stopped in the middle. I stopped and did the Intercoastal Mountain Way or whatever it's called, because I am not strong enough to get to the coast and do all that climbing in one day. Not for me. I've learned a lot. I left too late on that trip, so by the time I was getting to camp, the sun was setting and it was getting dark, and I was really cold because of sweating and things like that. And then I had the worst anxiety. I camped alone that night, and I did not sleep a week, not 1 week. I camped near like a creek. It was in a campground, but I wanted to be like away from everybody, so I was near this creek, and I'm really excited about that. And then I was like, no one can hear you. It was just really like, you're all alone. I'm like sitting there with like my light on and eating soup or something. And I'm like, somebody's watching you right now.
I think I saw this movie. It did not end well.
It was really, yeah. I mean, spoiler alert, ended fine. Yeah. I'm here with you gentlemen today. But I learned a lot about myself that night, and about like maybe I need to take a little bit of melatonin to take the edge off. So so I didn't sleep, and then, but when I woke up next to this creek, it was amazing. And I literally, I think I even said out loud, I was like, that's why I did that. That's why I'm doing this. And I always have one of those moments, and I haven't gone on long tours. This is something I aspire to. But even in overnight, if you're doing any kind of climbing or something's uncomfortable, I'm like, oh, why am I doing this? And then you have that, oh, right, that's why I'm doing this. So like the next day, and this was going to be just like a one-way thing. My wife was driving out to the coast, and so she was going to meet me. We were going to have dinner and then drive back. And but I didn't sleep at all, and all of that. So I was just like so fatigued, and I just like sort of picked an arbitrary spot on the map, learning about topography, also Oregon coast. What's up? So I picked a point, which was a lighthouse that had a lot of climbing at like the very last half mile, because lighthouses are up high where people can see them.
They don't tell you this in the touring books, do they?
Well, they probably do. I didn't read the books. But so it was like, Lisa was going to meet me and at this lighthouse. And I swear I could not, when I realized how much climbing I was going to have to do, I was ready to be done. I was like, I made it to the coast. It was this, there's like this extra climb to get up. I'm like, do I really need to be a hero right now? I could just feel so much better. And this could be the end of this trip, and I would be okay with that. There was no cell phone service, so I couldn't let her know that. And she drove past me up this like mountain practically to go and meet me at the lighthouse. She's like, see up there? And I like threw my hand in the air, like, please stop. No.
Hold that thought.
Yeah, exactly. So I did finish that, because I had to, because I didn't have a choice. It was really uncomfortable, but I was definitely very glad. I was so happy when I did. For sure, that type 2 fun. There's this photo of me where I'm just like, I remember that moment right there. Whereas like, I can't believe that I just did that. It's not even like, I don't know, it's not even that huge, but like when your body is just so done, you're so spent. I think any accomplishment can be something to celebrate.
There's an old Irish proverb about, you come up to a wall and you throw your hat over the wall to force you to climb it. Huh. She took the hat off your head and threw it over the wall.
I think she knew that too. I think we talked about it later, and I think she knew, like, and she wanted me to finish.
I was just thinking about the dynamic, like the last hurdle or the last mile problem of bike touring. For some people, I didn't think about it much until you brought it up, but the idea that like, whether you're camping in a legitimate campsite and you're allowed to be there, or whether you're camping, just putting up a tent wherever you can find a space and hoping no one kicks you out. Either way, if you're not comfortable where you are, like say if you're worried about animals showing up in the middle of the night, or if you're stealth camping and you're worried that somebody's going to show up with a shotgun, or any of the other anything that could happen at night, that's a huge barrier, I think, for some people, that the reason they wouldn't go, they may be okay sleeping on dirt, they may be okay riding a long ways, they may be okay sleeping outside, but like, what's going to happen while I'm trying to be unconscious and rest? That's a tricky part.
Yeah, security is a broader concept of all the same things, because I hear that all the time.
For sure. And the last time I experienced this, I wasn't actually bike camping, but I was traveling out of town, and a friend of mine owns a business that he said, you could sleep here. And the place that he intended for us to stay had a locked door. We had no key. So we were inside the building, but not like secluded or hidden away. We're kind of like out in this hallway. We end up rolling out our sleeping bags, laying on the floor. And the whole night, there's like, custodians show up like at midnight or something. So we'd like pass a dude carrying paper towels. And then, sometime midnight, there's like maybe like a security guy or something walking around. Or it's just like that, the whole feeling of like, I'm not going to rest well tonight, and I might wink out for a couple of minutes, but I'm not going to, because I don't know what's going to happen. Is someone going to discover me? Is something going to happen that I don't want to have happen? And but I remember feeling that when I was stealth camping on a solo bike tour back in 2010. I remember feeling that with Adele when we were out camping together, my wife, and just feeling like I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not sure if we should be here. I don't know if an animal is going to come, or like on our tour in Big Sur, Aaron, when raccoons tore into our Oreos.
Oh, yeah.
And each of us assumed that it was the other party having a midnight snack. But yeah, that's one of those things. I'd be very interested in hearing more people's experiences. Like, say someone writes to the Pedalshift Project,
hypothetically at pedalshift@pedalshift.net.
Yeah.
if you want to.
Right.
Or
But
call the voicemail hotline. I don't remember the hotline number.
yeah, but how do you get over the kind of the reticence to be outdoors? Like how do you beat that? Does it just take time?
Yeah.
Do you have strategies? Do you take melatonin? Like what is it that helps you get to the sleepy land?
Or you drink fine beers from the Portland area. Guthrie, did you ever have any reticence to sleeping outside? And if not, I would love to hear your
What is your secret?
your secrets, and if none of that is relevant, your type 2 story, which I would love to hear.
I think the secret is necessity, where you get done biking and then all of a sudden you're in this conundrum, which is, well, I need to sleep somewhere.
Yes.
So you kind of like pick your options from there. I'd say like my most like potential to be harrowing overnight camping experience was the first night of the trip actually that I took down in San Diego, heading out east, and like somehow it just never clicked to me how close we were riding to the border. And so when the tent was set up in a ditch on the side of a road, which is Highway 8 towards Acamba, and is apparently about 2 miles from the border, we started seeing like all these searchlights and like spotlights going on down at the lake, and it just like everything's already set up, right? And it just dawns on you of like, oh,
this may not be allowed. This is a thing.
Yeah. So I mean, fortunately, nothing came of it. Apparently, we stealth camped out the U.S. Border Patrol, but. Boy,
that's egg on their face, isn't it?
Yeah. Take that.
That is literally their only job.
So with that, I mean, like, I'd say that was my most like close to flying into the sun moment in terms of like bad decisions for overnight camping. But I've had a lot of really great places as well, and so getting over that, especially in the first night, I felt like after that, nothing can be, well, few things can be worse than like that potential. And so I don't really like. I run into the type 2 stuff, but I have also been very fortunate in that I haven't had to run into it too often. And so like when it comes along, it's more in like bits and spurts and is like a smaller piece of enjoyment. But in terms of the overnight camping, and I think it's just getting through that first night, like same deal as Kat was saying, the first bike tour I ever took, very similar deal. It was just out in Banks, Vernonia, which is about 30 miles from Portland, and showing up off season to an abandoned campsite. And that realization just kind of dawns on you of like, oh yeah, I'm doing this. And then, you can be scared and have some trepidation, but then the next morning, I totally have to agree with Kat. That's what makes it worth it.
Oh, that's super cool. All of you live in Portland. Spoiler alert, everyone.
Which, by the way, I feel honored that you chose Portland for your 100th episode location.
Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, I can do a cool little table meetup like this with full of cool people talking about bike touring.
That's like number 5. Come on.
Well, and also, this may not come as too much of a surprise. The number 1 city in my download statistics is Portland, Oregon.
Oh, really?
Why I did the meetup here last night. And by the way, thank you for coming to the meetup last night. It was fun. It was cool. And I'll have video of the bizarreness there, including for those of you who listen more to the Sprocket and keep hearing of the big stick up at the bar there at the Beer Mongers.
Right.
We got the origin story of the stick suspended from the ceiling. So I'll put that up on YouTube or some such nonsense. That guy was really, really fascinating. But it goes back to Portland being such a crazy, unique city. Maybe this doesn't have so much to do with bicycle touring, but I think that there's an element to it. And I'm curious, if you couldn't live in Portland, if for some reason that was removed from you.
Well, with housing these days.
I was going to say.
Might be Gresham.
Oh.
No.
Wow. For those of you who do not understand the Portland area, that wasn't
actually meant to be a dig. It was just meant to be a commentary on the price of
fact
housing.
that we're all being pushed
on the fact
out of
that
the
everybody,
city center.
In Portland, if you want to stay nearby, you got 2 options, east or west.
I heard Gresham is actually really hip right now.
Yeah.
Oh, did you leave out Vancouver,
and a lot
Washington?
More diverse,
Vancouver. I guess it doesn't. Yes, you can go north or south. Ow, that was a dig on Vancouver.
That was a dig on Vancouver.
I think there's just too much debris in that bikeway. It just doesn't even cross my mind.
Yeah, the bridge is rough.
My apologies, Vancouver. I love you and I visit you often.
Almost everybody here is not from, I shouldn't say not from the area or from the region, but I'm just curious if Portland were somehow raked from your fingers. Does anybody know where you would even think about, or is that just not even a possibility?
Yeah, I know. It's a really good question, actually. I want to tell you a longer version of that, which is, you know, like I came here for myself, but it was my wife wanted to move here first. Like a friend of hers from college moved here 12 years ago. And so she's been like wanting to move here forever. When we traveled across the country, every place that we stopped, every city that we stopped in, we were like kind of trying on, does this feel like home? What is it about this? And, you know, we were like evaluating how we felt about different places. So we didn't know when we got here if we were going to stay here or not. So it's just interesting because I can't really think of a place, of any other place. If I could, you know, just be like Fantasyland, Amsterdam is super cool, you know, but I don't know that I could ever be an expat. Maybe we'll find out. We'll find out, I suppose.
Yeah, we may not have a choice.
Yeah.
Anyway,
This is an interesting time to be alive, isn't it?
I'm a proud American. I'm not
Indeed.
really interested in. I'm not really interested in being an expat. But the point is that I think that's a really cool city. The East Coast is my home, but I miss my people. I don't miss that energy there. So I'm sure there are lots of places, tons of places I've never been to that would be great places to live. But right now I'm just like, I just want to be, I love living here. I'm so thankful to be here. I love being in a place where individuality is really appreciated and the bike culture is as it is here. So the only other parallel I can think of is Amsterdam to that.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Sorry, Minneapolis. I'm not.
Yeah. And that's sort of, I think the key is the bikiness element to it, because I think it's not a unique element of Portland, but it is a major factor about what makes Portland. And that's why I was sort of like, if that was taken away, is there another place that fits that bikiness? What about you, Guthrie?
I guess bikiness wise, not really. I mean, like, obviously Amsterdam has its parallels. If Portland was yanked out from under, I would say my first choice would be a semi-nomadic bike touring lifestyle. Like, ideally.
You gonna go Hans Stucke on us?
I have no clue. Yeah, if that were a thing and a possibility, that would be like first choice. Another one, like staying in Oregon. So I grew up in a very small town in Eastern Oregon, and when I moved from the east to the west side, it was moving from a town of about 200 people to Salem, which is about 400,000. So like that was a pretty big step, and so I've always thought of Portland over time as kind of that like biggest small city one can still somewhat sanely afford to live in. And in that regard, I kind of feel like it would be fun to bring a lot of what I've learned back to my community and to make a go of it there in some sort of bike-related thing. Because we've had a bike shop in Wallowa County that's no longer there. But the big trouble with that area is it snows for a good portion of the year, and so that's that conundrum, right? And I think it would be nice to think about like settling back that direction at some point in time. But I also have a lot of traveling. Jane and I have a lot of traveling that we both want to do. And I don't think that I could even pick a spot until we've kind of got that itch really well and scratched.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes sense. What about you, Aaron? Going back to Southeast Michigan or? No?
Oh, hell no.
I knew the answer to that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like what you said, Guthrie, about like taking your bikey experiences and what you've learned and what you know here and what you've experienced here and being able to like apply that elsewhere. I am so into bike fun that I don't think anywhere I go I could survive very long if there wasn't that kind of bike fun community, at least just kind of budding, if not already there and established. Although it's really cold, I've had my eye on Edmonton, Canada.
It's an interesting city.
Yes. Yes. And I just think it's so neat what they've done with the bike infrastructure over there.
Yeah.
Maybe not despite, perhaps because of where its location is. Like, it's so cold and like,
so far north.
Yeah, so far north.
Yeah.
But they're still like such a bikey town. And what they've been doing for infrastructure has been really neat. That said, if we're talking, more pragmatic, I'd probably end up moving somewhere closer to like Tulsa.
Well,
Just
that's
'cause-
interesting.
Well, yeah.
Tulsa
just
is
'cause-
not, from my experience, a super bikey town.
No, it's not. It's not. But that's where my lady friend,
Right.
her family is all in Oklahoma. And
Bring them bikes.
My listeners know I think Oklahoma is a really interesting place.
Right. Yeah, and we had talked about that a little bit more in detail. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting place. Brock, what about you? Would you? I know you're from. Are you not from Pierce County originally? Are you?
I am. I'm from Tacoma, more specifically Puyallup, more specifically yet Edgewood.
well,
from-
there you go.
Yeah, very very small town in a large metropolis area.
The talk here about going back and bringing your bikiness with you if you couldn't have it in Portland, would that appeal to you or something different? What would you think?
There's a lot of cool stuff happening up there. I think, based on my personal preferences, I think that I wouldn't live in my same hometown. Like, there's nothing happening there that I'm excited about. Tacoma's got some cool stuff going on, but if I couldn't have Portland, if it was ripped out from underneath me, then I think my first choice would probably be Eugene, Oregon, because I feel like that town is maybe even bikier than Portland in some ways. It's got a great beer scene. It's got a great music scene. It's well connected by transit. It's really close to the outdoors. But I don't know if that's too close to qualify for the question.
That works.
The other two
Gresham
options,
works, I think, too.
Yeah.
Vancouver, apparently, no.
St. John's is.
Yeah, St. John's is no.
I am strangely drawn to Vancouver, Washington's downtown area.
Yeah.
It's real charming and quaint. It's got everything you need, and their bike infrastructure has improved quite a bit since I lived there back in the mid-aughts. But the other two choices that I think I would go for would either be a tiny town where I could settle down with my vinyl records and my bike and a couple other things that I enjoy, my guitar, and like just be in a small town, kind of where I've gotten past maybe the most social of my years, I think, and so I could happily not retire, but like find a job that would sustain me in a really small town, maybe somewhere on the high desert, eastern Washington or Oregon.
Yeah.
I've got cousins in Ephrata. That's a really cool little town. It's very small. I'm not sure how well I'd adjust to small town life, but I do like what I see of that. Or island life, like going to, my wife and I have spent a couple different weekends visiting Vashon Island, which is pretty close to Tacoma and Seattle.
Yes.
But very distinctly its own thing because it's separated by a large body of water. And
But a quick ferry, and you're practically in Seattle.
And there's a lot to like kind of about the small town vibe of what's happening on those islands too. So
Yeah.
I could go in a lot of different ways, I think. I don't think I'd want to go into the mountains. I don't think I'd want to go to the East Coast as much as I like visiting that. And I don't think I'd want to go to Tulsa, but I'd visit.
There's a nice bar in Tulsa I've been to. I'm just saying.
yes.
I'm just saying.
we talked about that too.
We've
right?
talked about that,
Yeah.
yeah. Where my girlfriend's father ended up. He's like, "Y'all have any Schlitz?" and then he wanted then he asked, "Do you have any sweet wine?"
Sweet wine.
Yeah, he wanted the sweet wine. Yes, he does sound like the guy from that cartoon. Boise is the city that I hear when I ask that question
Interesting.
a lot.
Really?
They've got a burgeoning
interesting.
bike culture.
Burgeoning bike culture. It's like and a place. The reason why I think Portland is special to bring it back to bike touring is that it feels like that it's a crossroads. The Lewis and Clark Trail kind of goes through here. So many people will include Portland as a part of a coastal trip. They'll pop back out in back and forth. So I think about things like Boise now. They've got that hot spring loop ride that Adventure Cycling Association has. So there's so many interesting things that Portland used to be unique and in the true sense of the word, one of a kind. But I'm seeing Portland-ish things happening in other cities. So I'm just curious if that had trickled down to you all yet.
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely a thing. I can't remember if I had talked about this on a Sprocket episode, but there's a pretty cool bar in Japan that is like a Portland bar that's transposed into a location there. And so I think that the cultural component of Portland, like, if anything, that is one of our biggest exports, is that culture.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of places. That's what's exciting, is especially as like Portland is the top of many lists, but also in recent years finding itself not number one on those lists. It's a great like race to excellence where we now have competition and there are a lot of other good places. And that is certainly not to say that they weren't great places before like Portland became what we all know it as. More so to say that I feel like there's a lot of really nice accents that other cities are picking up on, and that's just bringing the overall envelope upwards in terms of making like good livable spaces and good places to create community.
I love that. It's like the Portlandization of all these different towns. That's cool.
And I think there's something to be said about sort of the increasing urbanization, at least here in the U.S.
Oh, yeah.
If not, the rest of the world. And I think that's great. I think I will always be a city kid. I don't think I could handle like small towns or rural living, but I do like getting out in the middle of nowhere from time to time, and that's the thing that makes Portland so unique. And that's the thing that like I could see Boise picking up on really easy too, and even Minnesota to some extent. Like there's a lot of cities around there, but there's so much outdoorsy stuff.
Oregon is unique in the sense because of the land use policies of the 1970s and the urban growth boundaries and things like that. I think that it is so quick and easy to get from the middle of downtown Portland to rural and then wilderness in a snap. And I don't think you can do that in a place like Boise, where Idaho doesn't have those types of land use laws and things like that. So it's got so many different unique characteristics to it, but I love that the ones that can be borrowed in other places are being borrowed. And I think it's to the benefit of bikey culture and touring and all of that other kind of stuff, because it's all out there. That's super cool. So now that I've wrestled away Portland from your cold dead hands, right? I'm just curious about other kind of aspirational things, but more directly in the bike touring context, like where is a place that you have not bike toured yet, or a specific tour? Like maybe you've toured there, but you've only been able to do like weekend tours, like you've talked about, Kat, and you've wanted to do longer ones. I'm curious, what's sort of the highest thing on your aspirational list? Do you have one, Kat?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go first because I've only done short tours.
Which I think that's common.
Yeah,
that's normal.
I mean, I've only done short overnights, like 1 and 2 nights. So I really want to do the Pacific Coast, like bad, and I really want to do a Trans Am. Both of those would be super rad. I think probably Pacific Coast first, just because proximity. Thinking about the Trans Am stuff is just something that makes my ADD brain start wondering about seasonality and all other kinds of things. So I would definitely just do that. I know that it's like just something that so many people have already done that it's not like a big deal to say that, but
it's still awesome though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I need to do like the whole like Canada to Mexico thing. That'd be pretty cool.
That's still been my favorite ride that I've ever done. It's and when you do get to the point when you look at a map and you're like, I connected those dots.
Yeah,
that's
pretty
so
dope.
Amazing. Yeah. Guthrie, what about you?
I would say my driving aspiration would be to, I always put it like a year or two out, so I'm like always working towards this goal. I would really love to take a year and a half or 2 off and cycle from the tip of North America to South America.
Oh, yeah.
And I keep on saying it will happen. It will. I'm kind of aiming for like before I'm 30 at this point, so I've got a good 2.5 years there. But I just want to get out on a bike, and I want to meet people and just really do a good long tour.
I've run into a bunch of people doing the Pacific Coast that do that very ride, the Alaska to Tierra ride. And what an adventure, man.
Yeah. Well, and I've spent a lot of time up in Alaska, so I already know that like I really like that part of the terrain. It's beautiful country. And so
is that the Dalton you'd be on?
The Dalton Highway. Yep. That's the super long one. There's a couple of stretches where there's no anything for hundreds of miles, but I mean, like I've always been attracted to the outdoors. I kind of grew up in the outdoors, living in Eastern Oregon, and the thing that we're working out now is to find out a way to bring our cat. So if we can bring
it's been done.
Exactly. Yeah. There's I should link you. There's a great bike touring blog who actually has brought their cat through. I think they did the South Passage of the ACA.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah, just like finding a way to make it work and getting something, just like I said, scratching that itch, just getting it out there. So that's my goal, and I think the more I say it, the more I'm likely to follow through on it.
There are studies that say that when you throw out your goals, that you're substantially more likely to follow through on your goals when you share them with other people.
Because people, you can hold me accountable.
That's part of it. Yeah, don't worry, nobody's listening to this podcast.
I won't say I've done it, because I've also read studies where once you say it, you get that euphoria or satisfaction of doing so.
As if you did it.
Exactly. So I'm avoiding that, but I'll take the other bit.
I ran into a guy on the Pacific Coast who was bringing his cat, and I was intensely curious because at the time I hadn't brought
Curious
my dogs.
like a cat, maybe.
Well, we all know what happens there. The cat, I was looking around. I was like, I'm asking him lots of questions, and I'm like, oh, well, by the way, where does the cat, go? Where's your cat's litter box? And he looks around, and we're at Samuel P. Taylor Park outside of San Francisco, and he just gestures around the redwoods. And he's like, "This is her litter box."
The nice thing is,
that was the best.
The world is her.
And the cat will take care of themselves.
Oh, yeah.
In that sense, in which a dog may not.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Not my dog. Oh my goodness. Bellstar just stays by my ankle the whole time, but she loves the tent, so that's all that matters. Aaron, what's on your bucket list, to use a phrase I hate to use?
I don't really have any specific goals. I mostly most of the long tours, all of the long tours I've ever done have always been with other people who have already planned the tours, and I'm like, hey, can I come along?
Yeah. But there isn't a place that you're just like, oh, I would really like to bike there.
There is. There's actually a lot of them. But yeah, just for the sake of fairness, I don't really have any specific goal or action plan yet. But I find myself really drawn to desolate places.
Oh, okay.
Would love to bike through like the Mojave, through Zion, things like that. There's this part of me that like fantasizes, and I mean like fantasy in a very literal sense, like not something that I would see as attainable in my life, but like fantasizes about like doing a whole like Australian outback into like Ayers Rock and Uluru, and hanging out there for a couple of days, and then going from essentially like doing a coast to coast from one side of Australia to another.
Yeah.
I think that would be really awesome. I don't think it's like feasible for me at this point in my life, but who knows?
It's good to have that, your thought process, because the opportunity could, somebody may be doing a tour and be like, hey, you want to come? Or you're like, hey, can I tag along? So
right.
It's good to have these. Hey, can I come? Yeah. Hey, Brock, what about you? You've hit a few good ones, I think, on your list. What's left? What's on the list?
It's funny. There's so few like specific ones left on the list. I think oftentimes when I think about taking my next tour, I think it'd be fun to go back to one of those places I've been to already.
Yeah.
But I think if I was going to go somewhere new, I really like the Cascades, the Sierra, and the Rocky Mountains. Like, I think I prefer traveling. I like seeing big open desert. I like seeing all that stuff. But I think the mountains are my favorite place to bicycle through. And I love camping by a stream. I love climbing up a hill that doesn't seem climbable. I love riding down a huge hill that, it could last forever. And yeah, I think that's where I would go, somewhere in there. Maybe farther south. I've never been really to much of the Sierra proper. Or perhaps like Rocky Mountains down in like southern Colorado, New Mexico would be interesting to explore, I think.
Yeah, the southern tier goes through a really interesting part of the Southern Rockies. I've thought that would be a really cool way to experience that. Yeah.
Yeah, and New Mexico has the benefit of it's like desert mountains, so it's both things that I like. So maybe that'll be the next one. Combo
trip. One of the things that I think is fascinating with bike touring is in the relatively short amount of time that I've been experiencing it, I think we're in the midst of a revolution, and that is the addition of bike packing into the whole equation. Yeah. And it's just fascinating because you look at all sorts of different things. Our phones have changed over the years, and all sorts of different things that we look at, over the years. You look from something 10 years ago, like, oh, wow, that looks really dated. And bicycle touring, while, yes, the stuff from 1976 was just kind of the beginning of the modern bicycle touring movement, at least in the States, it's panniers, it's stuff on bikes. Not a lot has changed. And then all of a sudden, in the last few years, we started getting into this bikepacking stuff. And the frame bags and all of that. And I'm curious in just how your exposure to all of this and what you've seen. Do you think that we're in a bit of a sea change, and that the rack and panniers or trailers or things like that's going to start to slowly be replaced? Or is this just its own unique thing that's an add-on to it? I'm curious what you all think. Guthrie, I feel like you might have some insight.
Yeah. And I'll preface this a little bit. I also do work for Film to Buy Bike, and so this is a thing that we think about: are these trends occurring, and if so, how do we seek out these trends and sort of reach out to people who are part of them? I would say yes. I think it's shifting. I got into it, I'm the stereotypical like Ortley pannier surly long haul trucker. Like I'm pretty as vanilla as it gets these days, which is kind of hilarious considering that was like sought after in terms of like this is the setup back in 2009 or 2010. I do think we are seeing a very precipitous change towards the direction of bike packing. I think people are realizing that you can bike on pavement and off-road, and that the flexibility to do either is very liberating. I do think that the traditional model of bike touring is not going to go away anytime soon, and I do think it's very appropriate in certain contexts. So, for example, like a very long tour, that would be a bit more of a like sensible bet. You can get a greatly increased amount of safety by carrying just a slightly larger amount of equipment. However, talking about like type 2 experiences, that especially for people who seek that out, bike touring is the perfect way to get a bunch of type 2 in a very good way and to really get the most out of that enjoyment on the saddle. And so, I would say yes. I don't know how far that pendulum will swing. I do think it is in motion. And mostly, especially from an industry standpoint, the amount of things that have been invented and are starting to cater to that market, it's just really nice to see that bike industry change up and be responsive to it. And I think that gets more people cycling or more people into it. And so I think it's a really good thing.
Yeah, even what type of bike is, the surly long haul trucker style, the steel frame bike.
Yeah.
Now with all these bike packing types of bags and whatnot, you don't necessarily need a bike that's sort of like that.
Yeah.
So that's really changing.
You show up at the cool bike shops, they're like, surly long haul trucker, what's that?
Yeah, right.
You get bike snob now.
Yeah. Actually, we tour on titanium bikes now. It's like, what? What do you think, Aaron?
Kind of to piggyback on that, but also I see it kind of as its own thing, and it'll probably continue to be its own thing with a lot of crossover, sort of like a Venn diagram. You have the everything but the kitchen sink type touring, and then you have the ultralight bike packing touring, and there's like some crossover, a lot of crossover between the two, with the new products and market in bike packing. I think it draws a lot more people in. It has kind of this cool, vibe.
It's
to
new.
It.
It's the new thing.
It's the new thing. And it's also more versatile.
Yeah.
You can be on road. You can be on gravel. You can like go to a place that seemed inaccessible by bike. Now it is accessible. And I think that's great. And I think the two industries will sort of grow independently or grow parallel to each other, but still have all that crossover. I don't think, like you said, Guthrie, I don't think the big back or the big pack touring is ever really going to go away. And I'll always kind of be on that side of things.
Amen. Just kidding.
and just also in the same coin, I think like that ultralight thing is not just a fad either. I think there'll always be somebody doing that, much in the same way like jazz was a thing, and then it split off into all these different types, quote unquote, types of jazz. Jazz never went away. Avant-garde jazz never went away. Big band jazz never went away. They just sort of like grew, Yeah.
It occurs to me, Kat, that you just led a tour with people who were new to touring, so you may have some interesting insight into that. Did you see a lot of bike packing stuff or not?
So here's what's interesting about that is that while we were setting it up, the woman at, I'm going to say BTA, but it's Street Trust now, she kept referencing it as bike packing. And I was like, we're not going bike packing. And so that was just really interesting to me because like that point of view, like I think bike packing has this idea of like it's like backpacking, but on a bike. Anytime you carry a bunch of stuff on your bike. Obviously we know it's a different thing. I think it's not going to go away. I don't have an answer in terms of like that particular group, didn't come up. I think that everybody who was in that group, knew the difference. And in fact, I think somebody had been on Jocelyn Gowdy's like Outback ride or something. So like there was an understanding that we're doing like paved road touring, whatever you want to call it, this overnight with like traditional rack and pannier setup, and then bike packing is a different thing. I think that having more diversity with how you set up your bike is huge. And in that way, I do think we're gonna see more crossover of seeing bikepacking bags on road touring, something that would seem more like a road touring setup. But I think the road touring rack and pannier thing is a really great entry point for everyone, or for lots of people. I don't want to say everyone. It's a really great entry point because it's kind of basic. You don't have to be a minimalist. I think what is happening is you've got folks who are now like, yeah, I've done this. I've done all the touring I want to do. I want to challenge myself with different routes or with minimizing my gear or just having a different setup. And so you're seeing like an evolution of people who've been really comfortable navigating that road touring space of being like, okay, this bores me now. Too many cars. I'm ready to go off road. So I think of it as like a setup, like a step up sort of a thing. And then in terms of those bags being available, I love that has just like added a lot of diversity to the way you can set up your bike. Like I want to put one of the half-size frame bags on my bike. And just like, but I have a rack and pannier system. It's not like I'm going to go and do that whole, I don't know what that thing is called, the one that hangs off the seat post, like whatever that seat post bag is. I'm probably not going to do that. That's not interesting to me. But I'll adapt some of the other things from bike packing into the setup that I plan on using on the road.
Yeah, I added a small frame or medium-sized frame bag to my traditional setup, and I really love having it. And it's just, that's what kind of prompted the question, because it's sort of like, I'm finding elements that I like, but not necessarily, I'm not ready to do what you just described, getting rid of my rack and pannier. They're perfectly great, and they work well for me.
Yeah, like I might end up doing that on my front, on the front rack, because like I don't love the front rack, and I like having the basket there. I don't know. I'm just sort of like kind of always tinkering to see like how I want to set something up differently. So I might do the salsa anything cages, because you can also carry a growler of beer in it. It's pretty cool. It just makes for a lot of diversity with what you can carry with some of those things. It's pretty cool.
Brock, do you have any thoughts on the evolution of bike touring and bike packing and all that?
The only problem that I foresee is that people will say, you're doing it wrong. And people have to buy much more expensive gear than they really need, because you can get good used gear in a lot of places. And I don't think people should, even if you want to ride gravel with a traditional road touring setup, I've done that many times. It's not jazz, people. It's not in great shape because of that, but it can be done.
Yeah.
So, just don't let the industry tell you that you can't do something because you don't have the right gear.
Or people on Facebook message boards. It is remarkable.
The worst.
Stay away from the worst.
Stay
away.
Where you'll find people who will just be the worst about how there's only one way to do bike touring, and that is so against the culture that I experience. And I'm just like, where are these people? And hopefully I don't run into them.
That's like the thing I love the most about it.
Yeah.
It's like everybody's setup is different. I love just like looking and seeing how everybody's personal preference
geeking out. Yeah.
It's
Back
just
to
like,
our nerddom,
that's
right?
what you're doing.
Otherwise, what would you talk about in camp?
Fair point.
I just wanted to put out there that back when I was getting into bike touring, one of the persons that really inspired me, and this was kind of one of my first exposures to the whole thing, was a friend who wanted to prove that you really don't need much more than willpower to get across anywhere on a bike. And so my first exposure to it was him getting a free bike on Craigslist and actually doing west to east, the entire route. And I won't exaggerate, stuff broke.
Oh, yeah.
And, there was a fair share of difficulty, that nicer components or, some gear selection can help mitigate. But you really, all you need is the passion. You get some passion, get a bike. It doesn't have to be fancy. And if anybody tells you you're doing it wrong, they themselves are incorrect.
They, in fact, are wrong. It is you who are wrong.
If it's working for you, you're good.
Speaking of passion, that's what we call segue in the business, kids. I'd like to say that just to start to wrap up this 100th edition, I mean, I don't think that this show would be possible without the passion of all of the people that are involved in the community, and I include all of you in it. So this is not your first rodeo in the Pedalshift Project, so I wanted to say thank you for being a part of this, and thank you for lending your wisdom and your thoughts and your ideas and your passion for all the people that listen to the show, because I know that they appreciate it as much as I do. So thank you on behalf of all of them. So thank you.
And thank you on behalf of all of them, because that's what you're bringing too.
Thank you, not just for doing the pedal shift, but like for 100 episodes.
That's kind of crazy,
Pedalshift
isn't it?
then.
I was going to wrap it up by saying, does anybody have a favorite moment other than your own appearances, which were awesome? But from the show, any stories that you remember from it or stuff like that?
One of my favorite things that ever happened on Pedalshift is when you were recapping your transit experiment from DC to Boston.
That was incredibly stupid, but it was awesome.
It was great. And you were camped out, stealth camped in a hammock, like behind a road sign somewhere at a junction of two roads.
Yeah,
behind
a billboard.
The bus will be here tomorrow at 5:30 a.m., so I will sleep here for 5 or 6 hours.
And then I was too excited and I couldn't sleep,
Right.
so I got up and I just started biking at like 3:30 in the morning.
Yep. It was great.
Speaking of nerds, anybody else have a Pedalshift 100 episode?
This is surprisingly not. It's kind of more on the mundane side of things, but I still go back to looking at your Brompton setup for touring and how you set up the back roller, your standard, Ortley back roller for just a standard bicycle rear rack. And how you set that up to be your main bag.
Yeah, the front
for
luggage
Brompton.
block. Yeah, that worked out really well, and I've used that before. Yeah, and then I got mocked a lot. Speaking of the people who say you're doing it wrong, I borrowed the Russ and Laura Pathless pedaled style to do the backpack on the back, and it worked great. But of course, everybody's like, "Oh, you're going to pop a wheelie all the way up these hills," and I'm like, "Fuck you, it's fine, it's fine." Oh, by the way, have you ever done anything like this? No, bye. Bye, Felicia, as the kids say. 10 years ago. What do you got? Any favorite moment?
Yeah, I would say my favorite moment is just a sensation, really, when I love how you do those like very frequent trips, and I'm forgetting the name of the route right now, but I think it's one of your favorites. You just kind of grab the dog, you head out for the weekend.
Yeah, just out on the CNO.
You're like, I'm escaping DC.
Yeah.
But the technical notes and the differences that you notice, your observation skills in your podcast and how you relate that to your listeners. I just love those episodes just in general where I feel like I'm right there with you, and it's just like I have my own touring buddy here in Portland, but you're halfway, you're all the way across the
Shit,
US.
that's a podcast I want to listen to.
Yeah, so just those moments, and there are many of them, just, that sense of being and being along there with you.
I didn't realize this was going to be such an ego boost here, but this is awesome. Kat, anything nearly as...
I'm gonna give you
Okay,
you
thank
two,
you.
and one more is a little ego boost. But yeah, off of what Guthrie's saying, like the excitement that you bring to every show is palpable. It's really great. I love Shifty the Elf. I love Shifty the Elf. Shifty the Elf was like, it was
Spoiler alert, Shifty the Elf will be making an appearance again soon
wait.
in the third annual
I'm
holiday.
so excited. I just thought it was so good as someone who makes a podcast, not with the experience that you have going into it. I just thought it was so clever and funny and really good, and I like how you're able to deal with lots of different things through Shifty the Elf.
Bit of a cliffhanger last year. Bit of a cliffhanger. Right? What's going to happen this year? We'll have to see. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I think Shifty the Elf is coming for the 101st. If not 102nd, he's coming. He's coming soon. So everybody, thank you so much for joining, and thank you all for joining me and for being a part of the show.
Thanks for having us.
You.
Thanks for what you do, Tim.
Interesting. I think one of my favorite parts about the roundtable is ending it like that. Interesting. I just like that. In any event, thank you again to all of the members of the roundtable. We've got your Aaron Flores, your Brock Dittis, your Guthrie Straw, and Kat Caparello. That was just a really great time, and I just knew when we were in the midst of all of it that it was going to be something special, and it was a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoyed that as well. So a big shout out, incidentally, to the Sprocket podcast. There were 3 members of the show there. One who's taken a little bit of time off, but that they were one of the folks that were up there on the stage for this Portland Podfest on Saturday evening, and they just killed it. They did a great job, and congrats for being featured in something as special as that. I also want to mention, just for edification, if you enjoy hearing me on the casts of pods, you enjoy hearing me cast those pods, whatever. I'm using verbs that don't exist, but I've got the Sprocket podcast. I was doing a recording with them on Monday, so that actually should be out by the time you're listening to this. So you may even have listened to that
before episode 100 here. That was a lot of fun, and we talked about bicycle touring on that. That's a really good show. I really recommend that. Brock Dittis, taking a bit of a break, but he's starting up a brand new podcast, and it's called Playlist Commentary. And by the time you hear this, it may actually be up and out. It is called, well, Playlist Commentary. And what's really cool about that, if you dug the episodes of the Pedalshift Project where we talked about playlists and music and things like that, that's what this show is all about. Now, it's got nothing to do necessarily with bicycle touring, but some of the songs that I chose are super relevant to the bicycle touring context. I'm in episode 4. You can go check that all out at playlistcommentary.com, or go check it out in any of your favorite podcast aggregators. It was a really fun one. The topic of the show was The Dream of the 90s is Alive in Portland. It was a playlist of the artists that met some of the artists that I saw play live in Portland when I lived there in the 90s. And so it's a lot of kind of, your alt rock and stuff like that. So it was pretty cool. Go check that out. It was a lot of fun to record that. And of course, Brock's been doing that with some other folks as well. So keep your ears open for that. Playlistcommentary.com if you want to go check that out. So lots of podcasts. If you want to hear my voice for the next several weeks, you've got a lot of it. The next episode of the Pedalshift Project, as we kind of alluded to at the end of the interview, is our 3rd annual Pedalshift Holiday Spectacular. It'll be episode 101, coming out December 21st at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. Yes, Shifty the Elf will be returning. And no, I will not tell you, because it's a great big secret. I'd like to give a big thank you out to all of the supporters of the show. If you like what you hear, you can help maintain Pedalshift as an independent, listener-supported voice while expanding the offerings by joining the Pedalshift Society. We're talking $5, $2, or even $1 a month. Helps with the cost of hosting the podcast and the website. You can do it for a bit. You can cancel anytime. One-shot support is always welcome. If you're not into the whole small monthly thing, you can do it all there at pedalshift.net/society. On to the society. Ethan Georgie, Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lane, Andrew McGregor, Michael Hart, Josiah Matthews, Keith Nagel, Brock Dittis, Thomas Skadow, Seth Krieger, Marco Loeb, Terrence Manson, Noah Schroer, Harry Delgadis, John Sikorsky, Richard Killian, Chris Barron, Brian Wren, Mark Van Ram, Brad Hipwell, Paul Mulvey, Stuart Buchan, Todd Stutz, Mr. T, Roxy Arning, Nathan Poulton, Harry Hugel, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LaGreco, Ruth Divorcey, Michelle Miller, Matthew Lewis, Michael Baker, Billy Crafton, Paul Culbertson, Scott Culbertson, Matt Perry, Danielle Jepson, Cody Florchinger, Tom Beninati, Bobby Ruppel, Roy Everett, Greg Braithwaite, John Mayer, William Cairns, and thank you all for 100 episodes. Whether you are anonymous or you are a past contributor, thank you for helping make these 100 episodes happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift Project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.